I've been using the iPhone 16 Pro Max for the last week, roughly, and I upgraded from my iPhone 15 Pro Max. So, what were the big differences that I noticed on the last week? And mainly, was it worth it? Did it change my life? Well, let's talk about it. So, no further ado, drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel. Let's talk about iPhone 16 Pro Max. For all of you wondering, was it worth it upgrading from my iPhone 16 Pro Max? Well, right away, I don't think so. I don't think it's worth upgrading from the iPhone 15 Pro Max to the iPhone 16 Pro Max. But I think that's an obvious conclusion to reach, because if you look at the spec lists of the phone from the last 2-3 years and you compare over the year upgrades, you notice that there are not big changes. From the iPhone 14 Pro Max to the 15 Pro Max, the biggest change was USB-C, titanium frames, and a bit of a newer design. From the iPhone 13 Pro Max to the 14 Pro Max was the 40 megapixel camera. And from the iPhone 12 Pro Max to the iPhone 13 Pro Max was 120 Hz. So from the iPhone 15 Pro Max to the 16 Pro Max, we have a new 40 megapixel ultra-wide lens, we have a new color, we have a new button, the camera control, and a little bit thinner bezels. So if you actually compare this upgrade to other upgrades, it's comparable, because it's not bigger than other upgrades, it's not more innovative, but it's also about the same. So for all of you saying, oh, it's the iPhone 15s, it isn't. It's the iPhone 16. It's just like the iPhone 15 was to the iPhone 14 and the iPhone 14 was to the iPhone 13. So if you go behind all of this logic, then you would call this iPhone the iPhone 12s, because again, since the iPhone 12s, no huge big differences that you can notice. But if you look at the differences solely between the iPhone 12 Pro Max and the iPhone 16 Pro Max, you will actually notice a huge jump in terms of innovation. But if you look at these upgrades one by one, 12 to the 13, 13 to the 14, 14 to the 15, and then 15 to the 16, you won't notice that big of a change. But changes compound. And with that, you get a big upgrade over 4 years. And so, that's the thing I want to tell you. The iPhone 16 Pro Max is not worth upgrading if you have the iPhone 15 Pro Max. If you have the iPhone 14 Pro Max, there are more arguments for you to upgrade, especially with USB-C, the new titanium frame, the new design, the new display, which is bigger, 6.9 inches now, and better cameras. Overall video quality is much better also. So there are some reasons for you to upgrade from the iPhone 14 to the iPhone 16. But still, if you have an iPhone 14 Pro Max, you're still really well served. If you have the iPhone 13 Pro Max, even more arguments can be made for you to upgrade. The new 40 megapixel main sensor is one of them. And of course, all of the rest of the upgrades from the iPhone 14 upwards. But if you have the iPhone 12 Pro Max, even bigger of an upgrade, and this time totally worth it, because you get USB-C, a new design, titanium frames, 40 megapixel camera, which is much better video quality, a 5x telephoto, a 40 megapixel ultra-wide lens, bigger displays, 6.9 inch on the Pro Max model. You get way brighter displays, much better audio on the speakers, much better hardware on the battery life, much better battery life in general, much better performance, much better gaming performance, much better efficiency, much better cooling. All of these are big upgrades from the iPhone 12. And that's how Apple operates. That's how Apple creates their lineups now. They don't create the iPhones thinking, oh, you should upgrade every year, and so every upgrade will be significant. They don't do that. And so after 1 week, me upgrading from the iPhone 15 Pro Max to the 16 Pro Max is normal that I don't notice any differences, at least big differences that I consider life-changing. But one thing is for sure, after a few years of doing this, of upgrading, I think back and think, how was my life with the iPhone 12 Pro Max? How was my life with the iPhone 13 Pro Max? And I think, was it different? And thinking back, it was very different. Now, this iPhone can last me 2 days. The iPhone 12 Pro Max couldn't. This iPhone can take beautiful video and beautiful photos, replacing my mirrorless camera for my travels. The iPhone 12 Pro Max couldn't. And upgrading every year just blurs your vision, because you get a new phone every year, you test out the new features, and most tech reviewers say, oh, it's the same phone. But most people don't upgrade this way. Most people don't sell their new iPhone 14 Pro Max, sell it before the iPhone 15 comes out or the 16 comes out, and they buy the new iPhone 16. Most people don't do that. And I do believe that most reviewers are blurred by this sense of upgrading every year, by this logic that it's not actually real. Most people don't upgrade every year, and so the upgrade feels much bigger. So for me, it's normal that this upgrade 1 week later was not life-changing. It is noticeable, especially on the battery life. You can really notice the upgrade from the iPhone 15 Pro Max, but mainly because this is a new battery. Overall, this is about 10 to 15% better than my iPhone 15 Pro Max. Noticeable on day-to-day life? Yes, I finished the day now with 35–40% of battery. Before, I finished the day with 15–10% maybe. While with the performance, it's a little bit more snappier doing things and tasks, like exporting 4K video, or even taking 4K video and photos. Now there's a lot less lag, especially when taking 40 megapixels on the camera app. And the camera is something that most people do really like. So what are the differences between the 16 Pro Max and the 15 Pro Max that I noticed? Well, 4K at 120 frames per second. Is it cool? Yes, it's cool if you are a person that really loves taking video, and slow motion video for you is essential for some shots. 4K 120 frames per second, it's great. And yeah, I think it's worth upgrading for just if you do really care about video. But on the 4K 60 frames per second log that you could take with the iPhone 15 Pro Max, it's the same. It's about the same. The thing is, this is a new sensor, a new 40 megapixel sensor. Do you notice the difference in terms of photo quality? Not that much on the wide lens. But one thing that you really notice is the faster shutter speed on the iPhone, because now you can capture fast moving objects with your camera really easily. So if you are on the road with a car and you're taking a picture of a moving car, you can freeze the car in frame, while before you couldn't. And you do really notice these shutter speeds being faster if you are shooting moving subjects, that if you shoot an animal, for example, that is never stopped, like always moving, you can get way better focus here. And this new feature might be important for you if you are shooting very fast moving subjects, but if you're not, that's the only change that I can say that I really notice on the camera side, on the ultra wide lens at least. The 5x telephoto, completely the same camera, no changes there. But the one thing that I noticed a bit was the 40 megapixel ultra wide lens. Whenever you are taking an ultra wide shot now, it's just a little bit more sharp, it's just a little bit better, more comparable to the wide lens, while before you had only a 12 megapixel ultra wide. Low light is a bit better, not that much better than the 15 Pro Max. Other than that, did not notice that much of a difference on the camera side. And yes, with the camera being almost the same, with having USB-C, the iPhone 15 Pro Max had USB-C, with having titanium frames, the same design, I did not really notice the difference. One thing that I was glad that I did not notice the difference was the size of the phone. Now we have a 6.9-inch display, before we had a 6.7, and you might be thinking, oh, this means now that this iPhone is bigger than the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And that's one thing that I did not notice, was the bigger size of the phone. And that's great, because I would be very annoyed. One thing that I don't really enjoy is the bigger size of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. And yeah, Apple made the iPhone 16 Pro Max bigger. And so I was like, I think it will be a deal breaker for me. I think I will get the 16 Pro this year. But then I went and bought the 16 Pro Max. And yeah, did I notice the bigger size of this phone? Because it's bigger than the iPhone 15 Pro Max. No, the size difference is really small. And so I don't think you will notice the difference if you think that the iPhone 15 Pro Max is too big, but you really enjoy the bigger display. So now you get a 6.9-inch display. Do you notice the difference of the bigger display? Well, maybe side to side with both iPhones, but using it day-to-day life, you don't notice. 0.2 inches is not that big. And it's not life-changing. So trust me, guys, the upgrade from the iPhone 15 Pro Max to the 16 Pro Max is really small. But like I told you in the beginning of this video, that's not the point. That's not the point for Apple to release an iPhone 16 Pro Max this year. It's not for those that have the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It isn't. And it does not make sense for Apple to do so, because smartphones have stabilized. They have been on the market for a long time, and now that they are mature, they only give you very small upgrades, very iterative upgrades, so you do not actually change the way that you use your smartphone that much. These are our main devices in our lives, so they cannot screw these up. So they make very small changes, and this is a very mature device. So they can tweak up the cameras, they can tweak up a bit of the design, make the chip faster, more efficient, increase the battery size for better battery life, use better materials, but other than that, the overall experience, if you are upgrading every year, will be about the same. In 3-4 years, you will notice the difference. So if you are coming from an iPhone 13 Pro Max, 12 Pro Max, or even the 14 Pro Max maybe, it will be a big upgrade. But if you are definitely coming from the iPhone 15 Pro Max, don't expect that the iPhone 16 Pro Max will be a good upgrade. If you are considering buying a new iPhone right now and thinking, should I buy the 15 Pro Max cheaper? Should I buy the 16 Pro Max retail price? Well, it depends on two things. Do you care about 4K 120 frames per second? Do you notice the difference in size between the 16 Pro Max and the 15 Pro Max? I don't, but you might notice. And the last thing, which color do you prefer? The blue titanium or the diesel titanium? Other than that, the differences are really small. Again, if you can find the iPhone 15 Pro Max for $900, buy it. It's a great deal. It's about the same phone as this one. I don't think that the camera button or the camera control that Apple likes to use, it's that big of a deal. I think it's a good gimmick to have. It's a super cool thing to have. But if you can save $300 when compared to the 16 Pro Max, save it. I don't think it's worth paying more for. And the last thing, it's Apple Intelligence. In the EU that I live, it's not available. It won't be available. But if you live in the US or outside of the EU, thanks EU, I'm pissed off about that, you will have access to Apple Intelligence. And with that, there's no differences between the 15 Pro Max and the 16 Pro Max. Both phones support Apple Intelligence. Both phones will have access to it. So if you buy the iPhone 15 Pro Max, it's not like you won't have access to it. So yeah, it's not a big upgrade if you are upgrading every year and you are coming from an iPhone 15 Pro Max. So for me, it was not life-changing. But if you are upgrading it from an older device, especially an iPhone 12 or 13, it's a big upgrade. So what's next for this phone? Well, I still need to review it. I still need to compare it to older devices. I will make separate comparison videos between the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the iPhone 15 Pro Max, and also the iPhone 16 Pro Max and the 14 Pro Max, 16 Pro Max and 13 Pro Max, 16 Pro Max and 12 Pro Max. All of those fun videos will come out in the next couple of weeks. So if you are excited for that, drop a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you want to know if you need to upgrade, what are the differences between your phone and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Other than that, thank you guys for watching. Drop a like down below, subscribe to the channel. Bye-bye.